everything that I've done has come from a part of me trying something, failing, trying something, failing, trying something, then probably achieving something out of it, and then trying something and failing again. So it's a cycle that you have to be comfortable with. It's a
Right.
cycle that you have to be okay with. I look forward to failing rather than, doing something without any problems, because then if you're not having problems, which means you've not probably progressed.
Welcome to the Zista podcast, where we invite industry professionals and academicians to answer questions that students have within a particular subject area. Today, we're focusing on experiential design, and joining us is none other than Aaquib Wani. Let's go straight into the session. Hi, Aaquib. Welcome to the podcast. We're delighted that you're here today.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you so much for having me on this. An absolute pleasure to be on this.
Fantastic, fantastic. So lovely to see such a nice, bright smile. I think we're coming into the podcast with a lot of energy.
Always. I mean, जब है तो दिखाएंगे.
Absolutely. All right, Akib, we've got a whole series of questions, that we want to ask you. I'm going to jump straight into it. When I was looking at the work that you've done, you've worked on some incredible projects. And one of the latest ones was the Underwater Symphony, which was the main stage at Sunburn Goa 2024. So I wanted to ask you, from your point of view, what's one of the most memorable experiences you've designed and what made it special for you?
I think I'll just go back to 2019 is, when we actually worked with Adidas to launch a shoe. Now you'll be thinking, yeah, it's just a shoe. What is so fun about it? But then again, they wanted to create an experience out of it, which
Okay.
meant can we create an experience that talks about the shoe in a different way that connects the audience with the story of the shoe, which meant, okay, can we look at it in a sense that what is it that the shoe has special this time around? Now, Ultra Boost is a series that year on year they keep launching, and that particular year called UB20, that was something that they had teamed up with the International Space Station. And that was apparently the first shoes that one was, which was something that was essentially launched in space. It was tried and tested in space.
Wow.
The entire idea only was something to do with outer space, which meant, okay, can we look at spaces that sort of replicate the outer space world? Which meant, okay, instead of hiring a venue, can we create a venue instead? Can we create an atmosphere that makes people feel like they've entered into a new world, a new portal? And that's what we ended up doing. I mean, usually, when agencies essentially present designs, we don't call ourselves an agency. We're a boutique design studio. This is where the difference came in. We said instead of doing it at a venue, let's create our own venue. I said, can we instead look at recreating a space that takes you out of this world? So what we did was essentially we created a planetarium, and we created our own dome as a structure. It had its very cool entrance, a very sci-fi
Nice.
looking tunnel. So, inside the planetarium, essentially, as you see, you have projections on the ceiling, right? And that's what we ended up doing there. We took the entire canvas on top. We, created visuals on the ceiling that were all projection mapping. And on that itself, you would see a shoe flying in, coming and going. You would see an astronaut coming in and going. So, you made it in a way that, you've entered a new universe. You are not in Bombay. I mean, that's where the event was happening. But then
So,
again, how do you sort of change the narrative that you are not at a known venue that you've usually been to going, right? So this is what we did was we rented out a huge ground, which is one of those MMRDA grounds in BKC, and essentially built everything from ground up. It was an experience that was talked about for months after that, in fact. And it was in fact one of the biggest events that Adidas had ever done. And we even got appreciation from the global Adidas team as to what we created. So it worked out very well in the end.
awesome, awesome. It's so important, firstly to think of stuff which is out of the box, but also to have a brand and, a marketing champion that from the brand side who can say, all right, Akib, let's go for it. Right.
Yeah.
So having a client who's also willing to walk that mile with you is so important, otherwise we may get an idea and we may take that lovely idea to a client and he or she may say, maybe not.
And
So
it did
yeah,
in
it's so
fact start
important.
with that. It did start with that, to be very honest. Yes, it did excite them purely because we were doing something else apart from what the other 10 agencies had presented them. But it also is about the storytelling. I very much emphasize on when we're doing these presentations that we create an atmosphere out of those itself. So actually,
Right.
I remember going in there. I made sure that they, turn off all the lights when I'm presenting. And I also went in with a speaker that was playing interstellar music. So, it was very much that you
Nice.
got the idea right at the get-go, then rather, make them wonder, okay, should we or should we not?
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Akib, how do you approach designing for festivals versus, say, corporate events or weddings? What's the key difference in your mindset?
Lots of differences here because at the end of the day, you have to remember that you're catering to thousands of people here. And first and foremost, your concern is always safety, right? You can't create something that's so beautiful, but then again, remember festivals, you also have bars, you also have alcohol being served, which means,
Sure.
there are going to be people who would want to do uh,
Crazy
naughty
stuff.
stuff. Yes, crazy stuff. Go a little wild with your designs. So we obviously have to think of designs that are idiot proof, that are drunk proof, that are safe enough for people to be able to be a part of those experiences, but then again, not hurt themselves regardless of what state they're in. And essentially, obviously, the idea is to also curate an experience at these festivals, right? So it all starts, let's say, 8 months before when your social media communications begin, right? And that's where your first touch point of design starts to get communicated with your audience. And when we are designing these communications, which is essentially brand identity part of it, the graphic design part of it, everything that you see on your social media for months as a build up plan till the end of the when the festival actually begins, there has to be a connect. It can't be your visual communication was something and on ground it looks something else.
Sure.
So
Sure.
that's something where we obviously also look into that. It has to have a cohesive language right from the start till the end. And what you see on ground is also something that you've been seeing when it comes to colors, the kind of fonts that you see, even the installations we create have to do something to do with the music festival. Remember that you're going to have 40, 50,000 people coming in, and you also know for a fact what is your target audience. Again, all of those things kept in mind is when we actually sit down and design things. We also reach out to structural engineers who give us an actual certificate to be able to say, okay, this is good to go on ground. So again, as pretty and beautiful it may look on ground with festivals, but there's obviously a lot of R&D that one has to do to be able to execute that in the end of the day.
The art and science of integrated creativity. I mean, I'm sure like what you're creating is making its way onto different platforms, different mediums, and having that common identity, that common theme is so important. So I'm so happy that you articulated that. And it also brought into something in the forefront, which is, you're not just creating an experience for that sake. It's there's a entire storytelling element, there's a narrative that's being woven around that entire experience. And that's what makes it memorable for customers, right?
100%. I mean, see, back in the day, I'll just give you an example. Back in the day, there was no such experience. There used to be a bar, there used to be the band playing, and all you would do is just enjoy the music, go back home. Now,
Sure.
things have changed. Brands want experiences, brands want people to engage with their products. And essentially, what that has turned into is, you get instant gratification, and that's what people are coming for now. People want their moments where there is a lot more that they can take back with them apart from just the performance. It's also a part of the festival, which is where we end up creating these installations, these photo ops, everything nice and pretty. So it's a space which is away from all your worries. It's away from everything that you have going on in your life. And this is a part where we're saying, come to a music festival, enjoy, forget all your worries. And this is where we give you that experience essentially.
Awesome. Awesome. So, Akib, I want to ask you the next question, which is that, can you give us an idea as to, a peek into your process? So, let's say a client has a brief or a vision in mind. How do you actually take that and translate it into let's say, an immersive experience for customers?
So essentially, for us, it's always easier for us to understand right at the beginning what is it the client is looking for. Now, in this case, we'll say, okay, we're designing a music festival. We know for a fact we're looking at zones, installation zones. We're looking at photo op areas where people can be engaged. We're also looking at branded zones, which is where sponsors could also do their bits when it comes to advertising because they're obviously bringing in the money. How do we keep everyone happy? Our process begins with essentially starting with mood boards, right? When we're saying mood boards, can we showcase a bunch of references, images of the internet to say, okay, these are the kind of things that we're looking at. And straight up, once we say, sort of get an okay from them to say, okay, these ideas work. Can we look at some sketches? Can we look at some 3Ds? Is when we go back to saying, okay, let's sketch things out. Let's see internally what it
Nice.
feels like. And then obviously, can we see how much space do we have on ground? So obviously, everything that we do has to be done in relation to with what's happening on ground as well. We can't just think of 100-foot installation one, because you would probably not have that space. So a lot of back and forth between us and the teams that also work on ground. Then also understanding, okay, if this size has been finalized, then we obviously get down to our 3D software. We build our 3Ds, then finally show 3D renders to a client to say, okay, this is what it's going to look like. If it's a kinetic installation, which means there's going to be movement between things in your objects, we also show what the animation could look like, just to give them an idea, just to make sure that they understand everything, and we're not saying things that they don't. Important for us as designers to communicate, and that's something that we very well focus on as well, apart from just showing nice designs, because I feel like in the entire process, we always have to remember a client has come to you for your services, which is essentially help them solve their problems. And us as designers, we are just problem solvers, is how I see it, right? And that's where our entire journey from right to beginning till the end is always to make sure the client is always satisfied. The client is always involved at every process, which is, show them, even if it's a sketch, even if it's a 3D, or show them what the drawings could look like. So, what that does, that works very well in your favor, because then you've sort of taken your client into confidence as to how you approach a problem, or how do you really take on to this. So this as a process is something that we've sort of worked upon for years, after obviously years of
Oh,
us trying multiple different things, us failing multiple times, not being able to crack what a client would want. But now I feel like we've come, luckily, touchwood, at a point where these sort of templates work for us. Yes, it may not work every time, but it has sort of helped us to put together. Right after 3Ds are done, we get on to obviously producing it on ground, and we always see these happy pictures from people across social media.
absolutely, absolutely. So much happening behind the scenes, and it just goes by in a jiffy. But the amount of planning, the sheer amount of dedication, the amount of people, the kind of technicians, the kind of skill sets that are coming together to make that one thing happen, it's mind-boggling if you come to think of it. And you're stitching it all together. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, yeah, it's months and months of just us waiting for a festival to begin and end. So, we can probably begin on the next one.
Awesome. All right. Let me ask you another kind of question. Now, let's say you were working on a project and it didn't go as planned. What do you do? How did you adapt? And what were some of the things that you may have learned from an incident like that?
So lots of times when we're thinking of something and it doesn't go as planned, obviously by now we've reached a point where we think of all the worst possible scenarios, right? And we don't bring on only such ideas where we know, okay, even the slightest of the concerns to say this is a 1% of it failing, we were not going to present it. We are not going to go on ground with it, because anything could go wrong. And we obviously don't want a situation where people are getting hurt, or, doing something technologically so advanced that, in India, we don't have that technology to begin with. And then it fails, and your client's like, okay, you promised me the stars and moons, but what is this? So obviously we don't get into that either. So it's important for us to know what our strengths are and play on those, rather than do something that we are also not confident on, because then that's a situation then you are only yourself putting into, and then you can't really blame anyone in that case but you, that you ended up presenting something didn't happen, and then purely because you weren't sure of. So we don't go into that territory at all, because they say you're only as good as your last event. So, I wouldn't really ever want to get into that situation.
That's so true. It's a pity, that life tends to be like that, that you're judged by your last performance. When actually speaking, whatever you've achieved is a result of a lot of effort over a lot of years and a lot of practice and skill that you've developed. So it's not fair, I feel, in a way, if you judge someone purely by their last performance. But life is the way it is, right? So you got
Yeah,
to
yeah. I mean,
take it in your stride and move on.
ruthless world is what it is.
Sure, sure. Okay. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, immersive technologies like, augmented reality, virtual reality. I'm sure you must be playing with a lot of these elements in your installations. Could you tell us about that?
I mean, with the augmented reality and virtual reality, yes, these are great ways to sort of, bring your audiences into another dimension altogether. The kind of stuff we do with music festivals, obviously, with the kind of high traffic that we have, we don't usually indulge in AR or VR sort of experiences. But the last time we did something similar to this was again the entire Adidas exhibit, which is where you had a headset that you would put on and actually see things, which is again getting immersed into the whole world of visuals that were essentially outer space visuals, and then also you as an astronaut, you dressed up as an astronaut exploring the world wearing the Adidas gear. So again, how do you take technology and how do you take art together to create an immersive experience? That's where we obviously come up with solutions and ideas, and basis that we have partners on ground, which are who are people who know technology very well, who understand these pieces very well. So we know obviously we end up collaborating and bringing that experience together. But for us, these are some of the instances that we've sort of worked on these VR experiences.
Absolutely. I can understand. Okay. Um, what do you see as, some of the biggest challenges in designing really large scale events like festivals, and what can students do to overcome it? So let's say, when I say students, I mean, let's say you're not someone as advanced as yourself. Let's say you're starting out in this space and you're going to face some challenges when you're trying to work on large scale events. How do you overcome those challenges?
I feel like, see, I'll tell you, when I started and when I end up working on new projects, I always challenge myself, but I also have to be real as to what I'm presenting. Like I said, even the 1% of the slightest margin of error could lead to situations which you don't want to be in. And my, suggestion always to youngsters working on such things is essentially do something that you're comfortable with. Anything that involves people, anything that involves lives. Because remember, the kind of scale of work we do, it also involves big scale structures, right? And which means obviously you have to be very, very careful as to what you're doing. This is where I feel, if there's an idea that you have, that's something that you're very confident of, get in touch with your peers, get a sense of, okay, is this okay, does will this work, will this not work? If you're feeling unsure, if you're not, great, take on support from your production vendor, and then build on it, and then essentially you have to trust what you've built, and you have to also trust your vendors who are going to make this. There are days when a vendor would also screw up, right? You've created something which is what this is structurally safe and sound, but then again, the vendor either hasn't welded it properly or has used thin pipes. How do you ever know? Will it ever be something that I will understand? Obviously,
Sure.
you'll have to learn this with time, understand with time, and then keep an eye on things on ground as to how things are being built. Always best to shake a structure and see its integrity. Does it is it is gonna is it gonna be okay when there are gonna be strong winds? Lots of challenges, obviously, but then again, I feel for youngsters, it's best to actually take guidance from someone who's already in this space rather than jumping into it straight away, and then
Sure.
understand how these things work on ground, and then essentially put your wings on and fly.
Absolutely. Actually, when you think of someone young, the only time when they would really work on a large scale event, I can imagine two scenarios in my mind. One is they've obviously become part of a larger organization. So they're working with a company that's taking on an event like that. So they're new to the company as a junior. The second scenario is today you have a lot of student based committees that
Yeah.
are really organizing some fantastic large scale student festivals in colleges. So college festivals. So like Malhar in Xavier's or Mood Indigo at IIT, Powai, or I'm just giving you a big examples which are closer to my home, but I'm sure similarly big events happen in Delhi and all different parts of the country. So those are the time when students actually work on some really large scale festivals, just by themselves. So I'm sure this advice will be really handy for them as well.
Always, I mean, whoever's hearing me out right now, if at all you have questions, please reach out to me in my Instagram DMs. Happy to help.
All right, Akib, I want to kind of ask you one more question, please.
Yes, please.
Uh, sure. So there are a lot of aspiring designers that want to move into the space of experiential design, the space that you're doing in so well in, right? So they want to move into experiential design, and they're thinking, where do I start? What should I do next? So what advice would you share with such people? They want to make their mark, they want to create these fantastic unforgettable experiences, but perhaps they don't know where to start. So could you shed some light on that?
Well, to begin with, I'll tell you what, I didn't intend to become a experiential designer myself ever. I didn't think of me being where I am right now either. And I feel like all of this, obviously, from one opportunity led to another, and then sort of found out that I enjoy doing this, is how, this is all of this panned out eventually. And if you ask me if there is an advice, I would always say team up with a team who's already in this field, which is essentially working with, for example, our studio is already doing experiential design. Find similar such studios that are doing experiential design, because what that will do is it's also going to help you experiment with the ideas that you have, and then also you will learn a lot on ground. And this is where I feel like the kind of work that we do, the kind of industry we're in, a lot of the things you won't ever find in a book. You won't find it anywhere. No college is going to teach you about certain things that you will learn on ground. And for that, I always feel like the best way to learn, the best way to start is actually join an organization where you can experiment, learn, fail, and then from there you can really grow into someone that you understand this world so much, so that, it'll help you understand if you want to do this or not. If you do
Right.
it, then you can eventually figure a way out to start building your own rapport, start building your own clientele, start building your own studio at the end of the day. That's how I actually approached it as well. And I feel that approach also is something that will very well work. Learn under someone, build your own clientele while you're learning, because if you leave that organization, straight up look for work, it's never going to happen. Great to market, great to network around, tell people who you are, what you do. Okay, you'll probably say, oh, but I don't have my own portfolio. I have portfolio that I worked for someone else. Then create your own portfolio. What if you were to create an experience for an XYZ brand? Can you
Sure.
create it on your own? Can you create an example? Show it to the world, show it to people, put it up on LinkedIn, put it up on social media, tag people, spam. I don't care. Like I do that still. I show it to the world. Be out there, be visible is how people will reach out to you eventually, and you will start having your own clientele. And by then, you already have a on ground experience of you being able to understand how things work, which will in return help you execute those cool ideas that you will present to your future clients as well. So I think it's fully doable. All you have to do is leave the comfort aside and actually begin doing something, because if you're not going to move, nothing's going to move around you. So yeah, that's
Awesome. Really, really sound advice. And I think your the tips that you shared were very practical, they're very grounded in reality. And I think it's actionable small steps that people can take to really come closer to their vision. So thanks so much for that, Akib.
no problem at all. I mean, I am a self-taught designer myself. So for me, everything that I've done has come from a part of me trying something, failing, trying something, failing, trying something, then probably achieving something out of it, and then trying something and failing again. So it's a cycle that you have to be comfortable with. It's a
Right.
cycle that you have to be okay with. I look forward to failing rather than, doing something without any problems, because then if you're not having problems, which means you've not probably progressed.
Or
That's
you've
how.
not challenged your that
Yes,
concept, or you've
yes,
not challenged yourself enough, right?
exactly. And you have to keep challenging yourself, because otherwise दिमाग को तो जंग लग जाएगा ना, तो नया कुछ तो करे ही नहीं तुम. That's
Right.
how I see it.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Akib. Thanks for making time in your schedule and coming on our podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and learning from you. So, thank you.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so glad I could take our time and share a bit of information, share a bit of gyan, the knowledge I have gained over years just by doing things on my own, and happy to help. And like I said, whoever has questions, queries as to, the kind of work we do or the shampoo I use, please reach out to me in my DMs on Instagram. Yeah, I
Sure.
have to help.
Absolutely. Great. Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amit.
Wow. That was an amazing session. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Follow us on YouTube to get notifications as and when new content goes live. You can also follow the Zista podcast on Apple Podcast and Spotify. This episode has been produced by the fantastic team at Zista, which includes Russell Aldridge, Udita Arana, Gaurav Patil, and Dhanisha. This is your host Amit Ahuja signing out. Till we meet again, stay curious.